When Carl Scully signed the deal in 2002, the Hunter was supposed to have 7 new 2-car train sets by the middle of 2005. That delivery date has come and gone, and passengers are still riding Valley rails in the old 1960s Rattlers.
I mean, even if you look at the government's own schedule now, it's a year late, and the cost has also blown out from 60 million to 100 million. We understand there's a couple of cars out on the tracks being tested, but what about the full lot of 14? When are we actually going to see them on the tracks? That's the important thing.
Minister John Watkins says delivery of the new trains is imminent, but he wouldn't elaborate on how long that will actually be. It's been suggested the new trains are being held off till just before next year's election.
Well, I can only hope that the manufacturer wouldn't be silly enough to play those sorts of games. If that's the case, then it is a cynical plot, but I think it's probably a little worse than that. The mismanagement overall and the supervision of the production of these rail cars obviously has gone seriously off the rails.
Minister Watkins today accused the opposition of plans to transfer the new Hunter cars to the North Coast should they get into power.
What he's suggesting about taking cars from the Hunter to the Tweed is simply wrong.
In the meantime, the old Rattlers roll on. Paul Lobb, NBN News.
Named in honour of Wallsend's own World War I hero Captain Clarence Jeffreys, this new estate represents the future of housing for defence personnel.
Housing 15 or so years ago was a big issue in defence. The housing stock was old, it was unattractive and frankly nobody wanted to live in them.
The Defence Housing Authority has retained half of the 68 properties, while investors have snapped up the remaining lots to lease only to defence personnel. Built on Army Training Depot land, complete with streets named after famous battles, the estate will cater for all branches of the military. With a baby on the way, Warrant Officer Troy Grimes and his wife Karen say they're happy to be settling in an area with people who share their lifestyle.
Say we go away on a weekend or overseas, at least we've got people around here that know our roles and that. They keep an eye on our houses, we keep an eye on theirs.
With Williamtown due to welcome the new airborne early warning aircraft within the next 12 months, the need for defence housing in the Hunter continues to grow.
We could use another 50 to 100 properties, so we're in the market looking for land and houses to buy or build in order to accommodate these other personnel.
Mitchell Hughes, NBN News.
By 2010, many hope the gallery will be transformed from this to this. And if it looks at all familiar, that could be because it's designed by the same architects behind Melbourne's Federation Square. But they say the concept is quite different.
The facade is a grey stainless steel that will shimmer in the sunlight, and it will change according to your angle of viewing the facade, but also as the sun changes during the day.
Councillors agreed last night that it was the best option, despite some concerns about the exterior and the cost, but the Melbourne firm claims it can be built to budget. Ironically, architect Peter Davidson has come full circle. He lived here until he was 6 while his father worked for the council.
From my point of view, it's a thrill to have the chance to make something for the place where you were born.
Council has already borrowed $5 million for the project, but needs another $32 million.
We think that with such a remarkable design, we'll be able to attract support locally and nationally.
But Councillor Barbara Gaudry says Council can't afford such a luxury.
I understand the benefits that this can bring to Newcastle, but I think we have our priorities wrong at this stage.
Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
On a dark Newcastle day, the financial cloud has lifted over the Knights, for next season anyway.
Once Coal and Allied came on board, it was like somebody turned a switch.
The club, though, wouldn't shed light on how much the one-year naming rights extension is worth, said to be over $1 million.
All I can say is it was a stroke of great fortune that we developed the relationship with Coal and Allied.
A relationship which started just over a year ago when the mining giant bailed out the Knights at the 11th hour. The new deal among the last items of business for Coal and Allied's outgoing managing director.
We are represented together in diverse ways in the Hunter Valley and Newcastle communities, and I hope that's a relationship that will continue.
Coal and Allied hasn't committed beyond 2007, but players are still smiling, knowing at least the club's off-field future is secure next season.
Yeah, it's a great decision for the club. We don't rely on a lease club to prop us up.
In contrast, things haven't been so bright on the park, but in this instance, history is on Newcastle's side.
Coal and Allied come on last year mid-year and it coincided to us, I think, winning about 8 from 11 our last 11 games.
Adam McKilrick, NBN News.
$1,200 ecstasy tablets were seized, 22 people were charged relating to illicit drug supply, and 3 Newcastle pubs were closed down for 72 hours in July last year. Over the last 2 days, Stephen Hunt, the licensee of the Kent Hotel, one of the 3 hotels involved, has faced the licensing court. Police prosecutor Jeff Dean attempted to prove that the licence is considered not to have been exercised in the public interest, and undercover officers were able to purchase prohibited drugs on numerous occasions from patrons and staff of the premises. He added that there had been a head-in-the-sand approach given by the licensee and management of the Kent Hotel. In documents tendered to the court, police allege that undercover officers visited the Kent Hotel in Hamilton 15 times and made 20 purchases of illicit drugs. The Defence Counsel Stephen Austin QC told the court that Mr Hunt had a zero-tolerance policy to drugs and had 20 surveillance cameras in the hotel, adding, "What more can a licensee do, Your Honour? This licensee has been entirely responsible." Magistrate Daphne Cock dismissed the complaint.
I've been asked by the Hunt family to advise they're very happy with the decision. They're particularly pleased that Magistrate Cock found that there was not any way in which their management of this hotel was in any way deficient.
Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
Less than a month ago, Cessnock Council resolved it would not investigate residential occupation as part of tourist developments in the Vineyards district. Now Council has moved to begin a rezoning process to allow the Aris Group to build 300 residential units as part of the Golden Bear Resort project. Council's General Manager says the project site off Wine Country Drive is outside the guidelines of the original resolution.
That particular site is actually on the edge of the vineyard area rather than being central to it. It's adjacent to the existing vintage development, which does have a residential component.
While the tourist part of the project is widely predicted to be beneficial to the area, the residential aspect will be further discussed at the next council meeting on the 2nd of August.
They haven't actually approved the proposal. What they've resolved to do is to prepare a draft local environmental plan to change the zoning, which has to go through a process, and there's a chance for public input and whatever else.
The Hunter Valley Vineyard Association was less than impressed with the prospect of a residential development in the area. The members of the association will meet in the next few days to formulate a response to the proposal. Mitchell Hughes, NBN News.
Hunter Urban Division of General Practice boss Dr Arne Sprogus told the inquiry at Lake Macquarie that frontline medical funding for the region is seriously lacking.
I tried to get across that we're about $30 million a year short in funding for GP services alone when you compare those to capital cities.
He wants a fairer system where the federal government spends money based on the number of people in a region, not just the number of sick people.
There should be a benchmark that says if you're not receiving the same amount of funding as most other parts of Australia, well, the Commonwealth should top it up, and communities should then be able to buy their own health resources to make up for the shortfall.
He says the government spends $100 a year more for each patient in Sydney than it does in the Hunter. Built for the bicentenary, the replica steamship William IV is now officially homeless. Newcastle Council can't afford to keep her and has been trying to give her away. But according to a report that will go to councillors next week, none of the three groups who want her can afford the $1 million needed to repair her. So at this stage, you can't even give it away.
Well, we can't give it away, but the recommendation also includes a provision for council to put on the open market.
The tenderers were Dungog Council that wants to make her into a land-based display and two harbour-based groups who want to see her sailing again.
To run it as a licensed floating restaurant, a bed and breakfast, backpackers, corporate charter, sail training vessel. That way it can be making money even when it's not sailing.
I suppose the uniting fact of all of the bicentennial ship projects, the Young Endeavour, the Endeavour replica, Lady Nelson, they all have the distinction of all going broke. And it's simply the fact that communities cannot afford the indulgence of this sort of thing.
So for now, the closest she'll get to the water is a good rain shower. Paul Lobb, NBN News.
If there's an upshot to being suspended from racing, Alan Robinson's found it.
We're going to play soccer, aren't we? For 3 months.
All smiles today, it was a gutted Robinson last night after fronting Racing New South Wales stewards.
It's disappointing. It's gut-wrenching, matter of fact. It's probably the saddest, like I say, the saddest day in my riding career.
It was this race at Rose Hill last month that caught the attention of stewards. Aboard the John Hawkes train Silent Song, Robinson was leading approaching the 600-metre mark. He still led going into the final straight before falling well back.
I rode it to instructions, you know. They went slow, so I went forward. I rode it to instructions, and that's all you can do. You're riding for the greatest stable in the world, John Hawkes, and you know you do what he tells you do what he tells you. And
it was another John Hawkes runner which won, heavily backed favourite, Contrast. Racing stewards found Robinson didn't take all reasonable measures to ensure Silent Song finished in the best possible place. As a result, he was handed down a 3-month suspension from racing last night.
I wouldn't suggest 3 months to a rider who rides as frequently as Alan Robinson isn't a substantial penalty.
Robinson is mounting an appeal. Adam McKilrick, NBN News. A change in venue and no break in the weather, but Phoenix broke South Cardiff early to take a 1-0 lead. On a bitterly cold and wet night, Phoenix continued to pepper the Gunners, but Derek Sharwood withstood the heat in goal. Still 1-0 to the Rangers, but South Cardiff did have its chance before Joel Woods' shot went wayward. This tackle on Keegan Wolfenden cost Phoenix a yellow card. One went South Cardiff's way too when Matthew Fisher returned the favour. On the back foot, the Gunners began to enjoy some possession, only to have this shot cleaned up. South Cardiff's Daniel Johnson's attempt looked promising but misfired. Phoenix was closer to the mark, if not for the Gunners' goalie. A late challenge again cost South Cardiff, sunk by a single goal. With a game in hand and 4 rounds out of the finals, the league newcomers sit in third place, just ahead of Hamilton Olympic. Adam McKilrick, NBN News.
"10 years in the making, this modified school chair is yet another step towards helping disabled children feel more comfortable among their peers.
It's the same chair that the other children in the class use, but with special supports and footrests and so on to make it more useful for a child who lacks stability.
The chair was the featured topic at today's conference for around 50 volunteers from the charity organisation Technical Aid for the Disabled. Dedicated to the design, construction and provision of aids for people with disabilities, the volunteers hope the chair will replace the need for multiple aid devices in the classroom.
And this chair we hope to develop will replace some of that and give them more freedom and movement so that they can have a better posture at school.
The chair is now readily available throughout the state and is already getting rave reviews.
I was watching a little child in a special school the other day sitting in one of the chairs with an enormous smile on his face and delighted to be able to use it.
Mitchell Hughes, NBN News. It's not just the hunter that's suffering from slow economic activity, with the entire state of New South Wales currently lagging well behind Western Australia and Queensland. At this morning's Hunter Region Economic Update, researchers explained the problems being faced by local business.
We know that consumer confidence in the regional economy is lower than it was 12 months ago, and also some key indicators of consumption, things like motor vehicle registrations and new housing, are both lower than they were the same time 12 months ago.
On a positive note, employment growth in the Hunter is more than double the state average, while unemployment is relatively low despite being higher than the rest of New South Wales. The Research Foundation says the outlook is positive according to the Hunter's leading index.
The index has been pretty reliable in picking the direction of economic activity, and at the moment it's forecasting a picking up in the pace of growth in 2007.
A recent boom in mining and an increase in non-residential building approvals is expected to drive the local revival, but a prolonged drought and rising interest rates could also be a factor.
Inflation is trending a little higher, and mainly because of that, it's quite possible we'll see another interest rate rise, perhaps as early as next month.
Mitchell Hughes, NBN News.
There is some scope to amend the draft strategy in terms of development potential in some areas in return for the transfer of lands into public ownership to achieve environmental outcomes.
Production at the former Southland mine resumed in March this year, 2 years after a large underground fire caused its closure. But by September, traditional methods will give way to the use of this giant machine known as a longwall top coal caver.
The longwall system shears the coal at a predetermined height, and then the coal collapses above it and runs down the rear of the canopies and onto a rear conveyor system.
Local mining unions are satisfied that the German and Chinese technology will be safe for Australian workers.
Provided that they can control the airborne dust problems here and the maintenance procedures that they put in place, I think it will be a great benefit.
The technology is already employed successfully in China and can extract 50% more coal from thick seams compared to other methods.
Historically, the mines has never produced much more than 2 million tonne a year, and ultimately the mine will produce 3 million tonne a year.
Once the $77 million machine is installed, Cessnock's last remaining coal mine will employ 270 people. Paul Lobb, NBN News.
Scone Airport has remained a thriving port for small aircraft despite early morning and late afternoon fog prompting the cancellation of its daily passenger service several years ago. But the option is again being investigated by regional airline Big Sky Express.
It'd be absolutely welcome by everybody. Unfortunately, Scone Airport, particularly in wintertime, is prone to fog. And if you have a plane based here, you can get out, but you can't always get in.
To overcome problems posed by Mother Nature, the airline is considering a midday landing and takeoff. Council says user demand is high, with a passenger service tipped to reduce isolation.
Previously, when we had a regular service, we had a down to Sydney in the morning, back in the evening, which was tremendous for people who had to go to Sydney on business, who had to go to Sydney for medical appointments and so on.
With the plan in the early stages, Council is keeping its feet firmly on the ground.
I don't think we want to get too excited about it yet. They've also got to convince the people who are flying from their other ports that another stop is desirable.
Christy Carter, NBN News. It's a study aimed at making the workforce more mother-friendly.
Previous research has indicated that there are difficulties that women experience juggling both family and work demands when they return to work. However, I'm interested in looking at the lived experiences of these women and to really determine what are the most significant stresses, as well as those things that help these women to return to work.
Over the next 2 months, Nicola Paget from the University of Newcastle will investigate women's personal experiences in returning to work and examine whether employers are offering enough support for the maternal workforce.
They'll be asked to participate in an interview which goes for approximately 60 minutes, and I'll just be asking some questions about their experiences to get their stories about their process of returning to work and the issues that they've faced.
The findings of the study will be used to help others through the return to work process in the future. The study is urging new mothers who've recently returned to work to contact them on 4921 6398.
So I'm looking for women who are returning to the workplace for the first time since having a child. So they may be in part-time employment, full-time employment, a range of occupations. And so within 12 months of returning to work.
Christy Carter, NBN News.
It's hardly been happy times for Adam McDougall since he left the Knights 2 years ago. Injury has limited his time for South Sydney, while a much publicised falling out mid-year left him a certainty to move on. The question of where to was answered today, with Newcastle beating Melbourne for his services.
I
always dreamed, I suppose, deep down to hopefully finish my career in Newcastle, and I'm just grateful to the club to give me that opportunity to be able to do that.
Due to his recent run of matches missed with injury, he's agreed to a pay-for-play type deal.
I've drawn a lot of inspiration from the way Ben Kennedy's gone in the last couple of years, and I'm definitely sure that I can come here and make a difference both on and off the field as far as bringing along some of the young kids I've got at the club.
It also rules out a stint playing in England, but does confirm that's where Matthew Gidley will head for the next 2 years with St Helens. It's reward for the years of service for a former Clubman of the Year who really is counting down the final days now, playing in a red and blue jumper.
I mean, it probably hasn't sunk in yet. It probably will closer towards the end of the season. But I've got some wonderful memories here. The club's had a huge impact on my life, and they're always going to be here. And Newcastle's always going to be here to come back to and support.
Jim Callanan, NBN News.
When the Tigers won the grand final last year, they contributed to an amazing stat that shows there's been 7 different grand final winners in 7 years. It's a great period for our game, and it highlights the competitive professionalism and the closeness, as well as the residual effect of a working salary cap that's having the same effect again this year. As we see last year's grand finalists, the Tigers and the Cowboys, on the verge of missing the top 8 altogether. Now, after the Tigers lost last weekend in Golden Point extra time, they slipped to 11th position on 18 points, and with no Benji Marshall for the rest of 2006, I believe they'll miss out. Now, for the Cowboys, because of their good start to the season, they're still in the top 8 in 7th position, but they are on a huge downward spiral, losing 7 of their last 8 games, and they're smack bang in the middle of controversy with rumours of sex scandals, reports of less than an ideal relationship between their coach and key players, leads me to think they're also going to miss out. Now, with the Tigers out of the picture for 2006 premiership claim, it leaves open the possibility of 8 different grand final winners in 8 years. For the record, the last 7 grand final winners read like this: Tigers, Bulldogs, Panthers, Roosters, Newcastle, Brisbane and the Storm. For mine, the only team in the competition currently with the ability to win this year that hasn't won in the last 7 years is the Dragons. All right, on the round 20, and tonight I like the Storm at home. 3 games on Saturday, it's the Bulldogs, Knights and the Broncos. On Sunday, Eels, Dragons and the Seagulls to win. Have a great weekend. I'll see you next week.
Conspicuous by his absence, George Carmot was ruled out before today's session even began, suffering from concussion. He's place to be filled by Brad Tighe against the Rabbitohs tomorrow night.
No, Bradley's been playing pretty well in recent weeks. I mean, he's played first grade this year and he's played plenty of first grade last year. Good opportunity for him and probably adds a bit to the team as well.
It's the only change from the side named earlier in the week, and while it's not panic stations, everyone knows the wins must start flowing soon to seal a top 8 spot and build momentum towards the semi-finals.
We've got about 5 or 6 games now before we have the bye, the last round. So we need to build, get some points on the board, get some confidence growing coming into the semi-finals.
While Newcastle would prefer just to concentrate on their game, they're aware the Rabbitohs' nature of play can quickly throw any game plan.
No, they've been playing pretty well and have been in a lot of games this year at the back end, and they're unpredictable by virtue of how they play.
And while Craig Smith has also confirmed this season will be his last, luckless hooker Luke Quigley had some reason to smile today, re-signing with the club for another year.
Coal industry representatives, local politicians and business groups from the Hunter and Northwest regions have mounted a joint lobbying effort to secure funding for a 6-kilometre railway tunnel through the Murrurundi Ranges. But the additional rail traffic through the heart of Scone has the local council concerned for both pedestrian and motorist safety.
We have 2 level crossings in Scone and a long train which would have 90 plus units would cut both level crossings if an accident occurred, and that's a bit of a worry.
If the tunnel isn't given state government go-ahead, the Newcastle Port Corporation stands to lose millions of dollars worth of export contracts. Gunnedar's emerging Karuna coal development just one of many producers who'd be forced to export out of Queensland. Council is calling for a comprehensive safety investigation before the proposal is given the green light.
We're certainly talking with the rail infrastructure people, and we want to be heard.
Meanwhile, Council has welcomed news that the long-awaited upgrade of the New England Highway at Holcomb's Hill, north of Aberdeen, will begin in August.
It's a realignment of the highway and the construction of a new bridge over the Great Northern Railway line, but it will remove a very dangerous and accident-prone black spot.
Christy Carter, NBN News.
It simply couldn't have started any worse for the Newcastle Jets, who fouled on the edge of the box to allow the Premiers to score after just 2 minutes through Nikolai Topo-Stanley. And they probably won't want to see the second goal in a hurry either. A mistake at the back gifting former Newcastle boy Robbie Middleby the chance to double the lead, which he duly took. Half-time was probably the best thing for Newcastle, who fought back after the break to pressure the Premiers. And it finally led to a breakthrough, albeit via the foot of Sydney's Terry McFlynn. Given the disrupted preparation, the 2-1 scoreline wasn't such a bad result.
I think every coach gets disappointed with a loss irrespective of its nature, and no different to today.
It is a little bit funny just to think that, I aspire to be like them and, these kids aspire to be like us. So we try to be good role models as much.
A colourful display outside Pensioners Hall as around 400 Dudley residents united, refusing to concede defeat on the sale of public land. While it's an ongoing battle, for these locals the message has always remained the same.
First choice is all the land should be kept as public space. It should be another King Edward Park. It should be a park, it's the gateway to the Awabakal, so we'd like to keep it that.
Members of the Dudley Progress Association have been frustrated their local member has been unable to convince the state government the land should remain in public ownership. But as the convoy of people power made its way through the streets towards the site of the former nursing home, Matthew Morris was an unexpected face in the crowd. On arrival, the protesters staked a traditional claim to the land, and under intense community pressure, the state member for Charlestown heeded their call.
What I've committed to and what I will maintain is my call on government to not sell it.
The fate of the site will now ultimately rest with Premier Morris Yemma, ironically the same man who approved the sale of the land in his role as Health Minister in 2004.
We've already got material off to the Premier, and part of that material includes a request for a delegation to meet with him.
The site is due to go under the hammer on August 16. Mitchell Hughes, NBN News.
There was little ground given from either side as the top two fought for every inch, let alone the number one spot. Up 16 points to 10 at half-time, Lakes looked to increase the margin, but a chorus of Robbie O'Savis rang out with an O'Davis classic in the corner. The next verse, somewhat muted, as Lakes eventually got the try they were after and a 10-point buffer to boot. With the Macquarie wounded also mounting up, they needed a spark, and the former Night Star delivered. A pinpoint pass finding Julian Bailey, who handled twice before stretching out to score and draw Macquarie back within 4. The match winner was even better. Halfback Chris Wan starting it off before finding new ways around Lakes' defence to finish off in style and hand the Scorpions a memorable 2-point win and the competition lead. It wasn't anywhere near as pretty between West and Cessnock, but the 10-point victory for the Goannas never looked better.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is your 2006 Billabong Pro Champ.
Let's give it up for your 2006 Billabong Pro Champion, ladies and gentlemen, Mick Fanning and runner-up Tajborough. This is where it gets scary. The Foster's is blowing.
When it comes to getting the Australian workforce skilled, TAFE colleges nationwide have long been the backbone of vocational education. As governments try to find solutions to the current skills shortages, the Independent Education Union has launched its own national inquiry to ensure TAFE is a relevant training provider for the future. Public hearings in Newcastle and on the Central Coast today were told that TAFE will be needed and help is required from both state and federal governments.
It needs an input of capital around infrastructure, it needs support for teachers, and it needs support generally to maintain the work that it has done well and continues to do well.
70 participants attended today's 2 hearings, and the Teachers Federation believes it's important the Hunter and Central Coast began the New South Wales stage of the inquiry.
We're a major industrial area, and I think it's important from the point of view of TAFE to make sure that it maintains its relevance to the training of people within this area.
The inquiry will report later in the year, but Chairman Peter Kell also wants input from business on their future expectations of TAFE.
We've had good responses from employers, from chambers of commerce and people who make the TAFE system work, and that includes small business and industry.
Gary Blair, NBN News. From humble beginnings with just 6 clients in the 1960s, Newcastle Meals on Wheels has grown into a large commercial operation producing 150,000 meals a year. The meals are still served and delivered, mostly by volunteers, but are now cooked in this new centralised kitchen at Tyers Hill before being distributed to smaller bases in each suburb.
All they've got to do now is plate the meals which are delivered to them in bulk from here, and it's just try and make things easier for our volunteers, which of course we couldn't work without.
In the 42 years that Tom has been a volunteer, there's been many changes.
With the rising petrol costs and everything, makes the food costs go up, and my major job is to actually produce a healthy 3-course meal for under $5.50.
700 volunteers currently serve and deliver the meals to the elderly and frail, but more help is needed.
We've got the possibility of tripling our output here, so we're actually on the move now to offer the service to any other elderly citizen centre or nursing home situation that requires cooked chill meals.
Paul Lobb, NBN News.
A huge contingent of Newcastle players in hospital is usually a fan's worst nightmare, but for these kids, today's visit was a rare break from treatment.
It's a long time in here for them, you know, some have been here for weeks on end, and you know, it's a bit of variation to see some new faces and faces that they're probably familiar with. It's great.
The team has health concerns of its own. Matt Gidley is nursing a hamstring injury, while Milton Thaiday suffered ankle ligament damage during the night's poor second half showing against the Rabbitohs. Clinging to a semi-final spot, Newcastle has 3 days to prepare for the clash with Cronulla at Shark Park.
We're not probably playing at 100% confidence where our game would like to be, but pushing on to this week, it's nearly got to be up around that to win.
To the round ball game, and the Jets were back in training this morning following their 2-1 loss to Sydney in the pre-season cup.
I think second half was probably a much better display by the boys, and second half, well, we won the game 1-0 in that half, and I think we did quite well.
The team's 2 Argentine trialists were on show for the first time, while Italian striker Giancarlo Casaraghi is also battling for one of 3 spots left on the roster.
There is still some talk of getting a few other players here as well, so hopefully by the 31st of July we'll have all bases covered.
The Jets will face the Queensland Roar in Port Macquarie this weekend. Mitchell Hughes, NBN News. After crashing out during qualifying in Germany, Stoner's season was back on track in the US, cruising in 3rd place as he engaged in a one-on-one battle with Spanish rival Dani Pedrosa. But Stoner's challenge ended in the gravel as he slid his Honda out of the race on lap 15. American Nicky Hayden boosted his title hopes as he claimed the checkered flag, while 5-time champion Valentino Rossi dropped out with 2 laps to go as his Yamaha spewed a cloud of smoke. Better news in the Supersport World Championship, with Hunter riders Kevin Curtin and Brock Parks finishing 1-2 in the Czech Republic. Between them, the Yamaha teammates led every one of the 18 laps around the Czech circuit, as almost half of the 38-rider field failed to finish in the sweltering conditions. The result sees Curtin move within 10 points of series leader Sébastien Charpentier, while Parks retains 3rd place in the standings, 27 points from the lead.
With land on the western side of Weekley's Drive rapidly becoming a haven for business, Thornton firm Hunterland wants to move on with another project. The Freeway North Business Park has been planned for a decade, but continues to await rezoning to allow work to start. Newcastle Council is the approval authority, but could lose that responsibility, with Planning Minister Frank Sartor considering whether his department should assess the project because of potential significance to the state's economy.
Yes, we welcome his looking at this proposal because the council has badly dropped the ball.
Lord Mayor John Tate agrees his councillors have to lift their game.
I don't have a problem if that happens, but what I would prefer to see is the elected body deal with it.
While preservation of trees on the 123-hectare site is an issue, Hunterland argues the environment will be protected whilst also delivering an extra 1,500 jobs. Meantime, there was an employment boost for the Lower Hunter today as 140 new jobs came online with the opening of the long-awaited Coles supermarket at Rutherford. It's the first of 3 major grocery stores and associated retail shops planned for the West Maitland shopping precinct. Gary Blair, NBN News.
It's welcome news for the University of Newcastle and particularly for potential students wanting to study in the disciplines of health and education. According to the university, the 264 new places have been allocated to areas of skills needs and student demand.
We unfortunately normally have to turn away a lot of very well qualified students who've applied to come into those places. So being able to add some additional spots for people to come in will be wonderful for the individual students, but also great for the health services as well.
Also among the new places, 20 for medicine students and 60 for the University of New England, as part of the recently announced Joint Universities Medical Program, a first for Australia.
It's wonderful news for the university, wonderful news for the country, I think, as well. As we all know, we need more rural doctors.
But Arne Sprogus from the Hunter Urban Division of General Practice says the government has not gone far enough.
Extra places, a great result. I think Newcastle deserved even more, and I'd be happy for more to disappear from Sydney and come up this way, but it's a very good start.
The extra 20 spots brings the total number of Commonwealth government-funded medical places at Newcastle to around 100.
I'd like 100. 100 extras, probably the sort of number we should be talking about.
Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
Newcastle's new 16-metre offshore patrol boat named Intrepid arrived in the harbour today. Built by Image Marine in Western Australia at a cost of $1.8 million, she's one of 6 new police vessels of the same size. A smaller 7-metre craft will be stationed on Lake Macquarie, with another to add to the 2 boats already in Port Stephens.
This launch will take care of the ocean areas between Nora Head and Berubia Point, 200 nautical miles seaward. And we've got Launch Nemesis at Port Stephens, which operates from Port Stephens up to Port Macquarie.
Intrepid was put through her paces off Newcastle today. Capable of travelling at up to 30 knots, the boat is also fitted with the latest thermal imaging technology.
Become very useful in search and rescue, be able to locate survivors in the water, and also if we're doing surveillance that can pick up people when we're looking for them in the dark, so it'll be quite handy in that part of our work.
So if you're on the water and you see this in your rearview mirror, pull over. Paul Lobb, NBN News.
You may remember him from the TV program Celebrity Overhaul. Well, today Dr John Tickell was encouraging a couple of Novocastrians in his typical charismatic style.
It's a sad fact of life that we just let ourselves go because as things overtake us, like money, like work, like stress, like success, whatever that is, but it's not very successful to be lying in a box sideways with a heart that's gone boom.
Joining 5 others in a fitness regime for the next 6 weeks, David Simmons from the Heart Foundation has already started his new exercise routine, walking daily and hitting the gym at least twice a week.
I guess I'm conscious of issues of trying to look after myself, particularly as a recipient of a quadruple bypass 3 years ago.
Knights chair Mike Tyler, who's constantly surrounded by finely tuned athletes, has also joined up. His aim to lose weight and exercise more.
I suppose just to fit into something smaller when I finish than I'm currently fitting into.
During his visit, Dr Tickell addressed the Newcastle Business Club luncheon, promoting his health and fitness message, many skipping the dessert. Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
The sides last met a month ago on a night where the video referee grabbed the headlines and the Sharks went home with the points. Both clubs have struggled since the round 16 clash, the Sharks without a win in 4. But with the fight for a finals berth heating up, Knights coach Michael Hagan says the form guide is out the window.
You know, they're coming off a number of losses and it's getting critical for both teams. So I don't know really what to take of their recent form, but I think their form this Friday will be a whole lot better than what they've shown.
For the Knights, Clint Newton, Anthony Quinn, Andrew Johns and Milton Thaiday are all under an injury cloud, but have been named in Hagan's starting 13. Nathan Hinton and David Siege remain on standby.
We're probably not going to get a lot of work done between now and Friday, but certainly by Thursday we'll have a good indication of where we're at.
On a positive note, George Carmont and Regan Tanner will make a timely return, with Tanner delaying knee surgery.
Just a bit of cartilage, so I'll just play through with it to the end of the year and get it cleaned up then.
And while South Sydney has released Adam McDougall because he doesn't fit into the club's culture, Knights management has no such concerns.
We know what Adam will bring to the club. We've had experience with Adam. I've really got no concerns about what's going on down at Souths.
Late this afternoon, the club ruled out signing McDougall for the remainder of the season. Mitchell Hughes, NBN News.
The Atlantic Ocean is known for dishing up some of the most punishing sea conditions on the planet. So how would you like to make a fast Atlantic crossing in this tiddler? At 21 feet long or a shade over 6 metres, Tom Braidwood's yacht Wombat is being groomed for one of the world's toughest races, the Mini Transat.
It's a race from La Rochelle in France down through the Canary Islands and finishing up in Salvador in Brazil, and it's a single-handed race.
Tom and his $300,000 boat will be training from Newcastle for the next few months, where the boat will be fitted with a new mast to meet the stringent conditions of the race. If he wants to sleep on the 28-day Atlantic crossing, he'll have to share the tiny cabin with the canting keel mechanism. And there's no toilet. That's where the bucket comes in.
They're quite an exciting little boat. This boat weighs all up
900 kilos and it's got the same downwind sail area as an equivalent 40-45 foot boat.
The boat will be shipped to France in December, where Tom will prepare for the 8,000 kilometre race. Paul Lobb, NBN News.
Watching the footage of yesterday's interview for the first time, Bryce Gaudry was shocked and bewildered by the Premier's comments.
Bryce has indicated that he wishes to retire.
The Premier's been misinformed. I want to make it clear to the Premier, the party and the people of Newcastle that I will be standing in whatever pre-selection is held by the Labor Party for the seat of Newcastle.
Mr Gaudry has had some health problems but says he certainly isn't contemplating retirement, adding that he believes he has the support of Newcastle voters.
I want to speak directly to the Premier and make it very clear to him that I have no intention of stepping aside.
That's something Bryce Gaudry has already indicated at the State Labor Conference, when Newcastle's rank and file protested against the potential appointment of the Lord Mayor.
He'd given an indication that he wished to retire. Now there's some traditional argy-bargy about who replaces, but we will work through that to get the best candidate.
In other news, Newcastle City Council last night committed $3.5 million from council reserves to the $37 million redevelopment of the Newcastle Region Art Gallery. The decision comes despite council's annual shortfall of $12 million for infrastructure maintenance and renewal. Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
This multi-million-dollar early learning centre inside the Williamtown base is just one way the federal government is trying to retain defence personnel. The new centre and an existing facility now allow 90 children daily to receive care while their parents work on Australia's defence responsibilities.
I absolutely love having my son in here. I actually work just down the road, so I can come in whenever I want to see him. So at lunchtime I can come in and feed him and all that sort of stuff.
But as Defence Personnel Minister Bruce Bilson discovered today, demand is outstripping supply. With increased global commitments for the ADF and Williamtown now being home base for 3,500 personnel, the need for more childcare had to be brought to his attention.
Families. So what we need is quality childcare, but we also need to make sure that the hours of operation suit the men and women who serve our nation at Williamtown RAF Base.
And after speaking with parents and children, the family-friendly minister admits he's got work to do to assist his Williamtown personnel.
And they need to be clear of mind, they need to be focused on their tasks, and a key part of that is making sure that their home life is supported, that they have no concerns there, and that's where facilities like this are just so important.
Gary Blair, NBN News.
Running up to an election, they realise that they've created a marine park that's a monster for them. The community are angry, and I think they're extending that submission date to the 23rd of September to allow themselves a little more breathing space.
What we're doing is targeting streets where there's complaints or from police information and our own information on where speeding is an issue for residents.
Using radar and camera car use, we can target known locations and known times.
Ambulance officers say truck crashes like this are becoming less frequent, making the opportunity for simulated training even more important. Rescue teams from Hamilton, Rutherford, Singleton and Point Clare on the Central Coast took advantage of this written-off prime mover at O'Neill's at Sandgate today.
Today we were faced with an exercise where a truck had rolled on its side. We had to access the driver, stabilise the driver, remove him from the vehicle through the door.
Even the pretend patient looked uncomfortable as he was strapped to a backboard in case of any spinal damage. Rescue trainers say dealing with a truck rollover can not only be dangerous but awkward.
Trucks are very difficult to access because once they're on the side you're looking at 10 tonne, pressing down on the weight. Depending which side it rolls, whether the driver's down or the driver's up. Fortunately this was a driver up scenario. He was only minor injuries which enabled us to access him pretty well. But still you have to have the truck door held up. You still have to get people inside the truck which has been wrecked.
Paul Lobb, NBN News.
With the Jets preparing to head to Port Macquarie for their pre-season clash with the Queensland Roar, today was the last chance for the coaching staff to assess the talent at their disposal. With defender Alan Picken on his way to England, it's back to the drawing board for coach Nick Theodorakopoulos.
A lot more homework to do now. He was obviously a player that would have been in the first 11, someone that I depended on. He had the knee operation, he was looking very good.
The Jets coach admits it's a great opportunity for Picken, but says Football Federation Australia should be doing more to help the A-League compete with English lower division clubs.
And the only one that can assist us is the FFA, and maybe set up a system where we can't lose players of calibre or quality to clubs like Walsall.
Onto the playing roster, and Theodorakopoulos will meet with assistant coach Gary Von Egmond tonight before making recommendations to club management about the 6 international players. While Kiwis Campbell Banks and Stephen Old were impressive during the session, the problem remains the same.
Well, a striker, without a doubt. Of course I need a keeper. It's just the same old story, striker, keeper, and I'm certainly looking at a left-sided player at the same time.
Mitchell Hughes, NBN News. With the Jets preparing to head to Port Macquarie for their pre-season clash with the Queensland Roar, today was the last chance for the coaching staff to assess the talent at their disposal. With defender Alan Picken on his way to England, it's back to the drawing board for coach Nick Theodorakopoulos.
A lot more homework to do now. He was obviously a player that would have been in the first 11, someone that I depended on. He had the knee operation, he was looking very good.
The Jets coach admits it's a great opportunity for Picken, but says Football Federation Australia should be doing more to help the A-League compete with English lower division clubs.
And the only one that can assist us is the FFA.